Before we get into the account of tonight, I'd like to share something about previous operations this year. For the ones done with From the Tower of Darkness, afterwards, somewhere in the south, as I walked out at night, there was a few flashes of light each time. Now, with this volume, instead of being in the south, they have been in the west. Already, during the pentagram rite, the pleasant tingling started. At the end, I felt a euphoric rush, and what I'm going to tell you about dissolved in the sparklies. Now, the first thing I saw was a scimitar that was purple. And one of the first things I noticed was in the shadows, which during the rituals become very pronounced and even end up around things like lights, which you don't really see, but that's, the shadow aspect is, how to describe it. But around this, there was a light blue in the shadows. And there was different blobs and flashes of different colors. And eventually, there was a materializing of a building with 5 steps leading up to it, which is, I guess, about the size of the 2 rooms here, the temple room, and the 11 outside ritual spaces. And during the actual final selections, I felt this strange, jolty feeling inside of me. But just before that, in the final vibrations, I felt the presence particularly strong from above, then below, and then off to the north. One finds that in some sense, definitely in terms of interpretation sometimes, matter, time, and space, whereas not real, are like, one might think the opposite. Now, what do we need to fight? Do we need to fight the magician or devotee or whatever of what is perceived as closer to the opposite path? Do we fight the monster or the individual of the other gender? Perhaps they're all on the same thing. Now, there is quite a merit to those who give their identity over to the cause. And in that facelessness, they can, per se, get away with things that they might not otherwise get away from. You encounter yourself, your higher self, along the path. And one of the things along the path that you also come across is that some beings or incarnated entities with choice, we tend to call them humans, they aren't going to advance past a particular sphere. And they're only for that sphere of development. Or are they? Right? And some sacrifices to be made along the way aren't quite what we think they are. In the 4th chapter, we realize that different stages may require different ways, that you may have to step aside from one thing that you were upon towards another thing. In the 5th chapter, we learn that we need to distinguish between just being an observer and being an actual participant in the sacraments of acts. In the 6th chapter, we think of how sometimes we don't know the purpose of others. Sometimes the mystery is different for different individuals. Now, breaking up which tarot cards we refer to is kind of difficult at times as far as this book. Definitely we get to the art card, and this book follows the lower spheres. So what would you have? The universe, the judgment, the sun, the star, the moon, art, death, the devil, the tower. I know I'm not saying these in order. In the 7th chapter, we think of how morality is thought of or expressed differently for different cultures. That things can be as the opposite, and we may not intend to cause offense or for people to feel oppressed, but, some of that's going to happen anyways. And, who is really insane, right?